morning and welcome to the program Good Morning St. Lucia Vibes at Sunrise on this St. Cecilia's Day, the Feast of Musicians. My name is SHANNON. Thanks for waking up and joining us on this Tuesday, November 22nd. Let me tell you, it was my intention to do some sort of a musical interlude to this morning's intro, some sort of extempo, but the weather has been fine for the past few hours, so I decided to abort that. We welcome you on this day as we get set to celebrate musicians at home and abroad. Coming up, we'll take you downtown Castries to enjoy the melodies of some of our very best musicians, and we'll also hear from industry insiders on the musical journey, the past, the now, and where we're headed. Plus, 2 Cent Tuesdays with Dr. Jimmy Fletcher, and we'll also debut a St. Lucian music video highlighting the threat of climate change. Here's your invitation to remain with us from now until 9. Our time just about 6:07. The latest news headlines. Your first news of the day with Shannon LeBourne comes up next.
The morning news, first news of the day, is sponsored by Quartz.
Good morning. Our top story: multiple occupants of a minibus, including 2 critical passengers, were transported to hospital on Monday afternoon following a near-fatal crash in Canaries. The Soufrière fire station responded after receiving a distress call at about 1:25 p.m. and emergency responders reported finding 8 individuals at the scene, 2 of whom had severe injuries. The responders transported the 2 to the Soufrière hospital while others received medical attention at the scene. The minibus, registration number 219, was traveling from Castries to Soufrière with 13 occupants. When the driver encountered problems, the vehicle soon after overturned. At the scene, Canaries Health Center nurses and the police provided invaluable assistance. Good Morning St. Lucia again encourages drivers and all road users to exercise greater caution when traversing the nation's streets. This month, November, is being observed as Road Safety Awareness Month. After days of intense negotiations that stretched into the early morning hours on Sunday, countries at the latest United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP27, reached agreement on an outcome to establish a funding mechanism to compensate vulnerable nations for loss and damage from climate-induced disasters. This COP has taken an important step towards justice. I welcome the decision to establish a loss and damage fund and to operationalize it in the coming period, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in a video message issued at the venue conference in Egypt, underscoring that the voice of those on front lines of the climate crisis must be heard. The UN chief was referring to what ended up becoming the thorniest issue at this COP, shorthand for the annual conference of parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. Developing countries made strong and repeated appeals for the establishment of a loss and damage fund to compensate the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change, yet who have contributed little to the climate crisis. Clearly, this will not be enough, but it is a much-needed political signal to rebuild broken trust, the UN Secretary General underscored, stressing that the UN system will support the effort every step of the way. Ahead of the action on the text, COP27 President Shamir Shukuri, who is also the Foreign Minister for Egypt, told delegations that the draft decisions were a getaway that will scale up implementation and will enable us to transform to a future of climate future neutrality and climate resilient development. After missing their Friday night deadline, negotiators were finally able to reach conclusions on the most difficult items on the agenda, including a loss and damage facility with a commitment to set up a financial support structure for the most vulnerable by the next COP. in 2023, as well as the post-2025 finance goal and the so-called mitigation work program that would reduce emissions faster, catalyze impactful action, and secure assurances from key countries that they will take immediate action to raise ambition and keep us on the path towards a 1.5 degrees Celsius. Yet, while agreement on these issues was seen as a welcome step in the right direction, there appeared to be little forward movement on other key issues, particularly on the phasing out of fossil fuels, and tightened language on the need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Observers have warned that new language including low emissions energy alongside renewables as energy sources of the future is a significant loophole, as undefined term could be used to justify new fossil fuel development against the clear guidance of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. Here at home, the Parliament of St. Lucia is set to convene today, Tuesday, November the 22nd. This sitting of the House of Assembly is scheduled to commence from 10 a.m. The following bills are down for consideration: the Constitution of St. Lucia Amendment number 2 and the St. Jude Hospital Amendment. Unconstitutional. That's the latest reactions to a press announcement of the appointment of Mr. Oswald Augustine as the General Secretary of the United Workers' Party. Members are also dismissing claims of division and infighting. Nelson, take a closer look.
Since its crashing 15-2 defeat at the 2021 general election, the embattled political opposition has been rumored to be in a state of disarray and has been unable to find its footing. But former Senator Fortuna Belrose has dismissed claims suggesting of infighting, explaining instead that the party is currently undergoing a restructuring process, which will include some level of disagreement. She noted that the party is regrouping in preparation for the next general election. But this comes as little consolation to members of the party who contend that the election of its General Secretary, Oswald Augustine, is unconstitutional. Augustine, who has served as the party's General Secretary from 2013 to 2018 and Chairman from 2018 to 2020, was re-elected on Wednesday, November 17th by the party's National Executive. While Belrose was tight-lipped about the process, she says she sees nothing wrong with the manner in which the elections took place.
I too was not at the meeting, but from what I know, the executive of the United Workers' Party can convene at any time, and the Constitution allows them to do emergency meetings. So to my mind, I don't see anything wrong with that meeting that was convened, but the important thing for us is that we were grouping to come back. It seemed to me there's a big story because we're already creating waves.
Meanwhile, Augustine came in for high praise from the former senator for his stewardship during his former terms in office. She noted that the expectation is high but expects nothing short of stellar representation from the new General Secretary.
Oswald has served the party very well over the last few years, and of course he's been duly appointed by the team within the organization, the executive of the organization. And of course, I think we just need to allow the party to do its work on the inside, and give us a break for a little while. We'll be happy to talk to you guys when we are ready and willing to go.
Reporting for the Hot 7 TV News, I am Kareem Nelson.
Thanks so much, Kareem. St. Lucians are being strongly urged to brace for flooding and landslides which can be triggered by adverse weather conditions expected to affect the island. According to the latest information from the Saint Lucia Met Service, who are tracking this broad area of disturbed weather associated with the trough system, it continues to generate periods of cloudiness, scattered moderate to heavy showers, gusty winds, and isolated thunderstorms. The National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, has also issued an advisory to the general public. Jasmine Duncan reports.
According to a press release by NEMO, the Saint Lucia Met Services is tracking an approaching trough system, which is expected to affect the island from November 21st. Citizens can expect unstable weather conditions to affect the island for up to 48 hours starting on Monday. This will include heavy rains. There are high levels of soil saturation due to heavy rains in recent weeks, and in light of the recent flash flood that ravaged some parts of the island, Citizens are advised that the passage of the approaching trough system will increase the risk of flash flooding, landslides, and rockfall. Motorists and commuters are strongly advised to exercise due caution and remain vigilant when traversing the east and west coast roads. Residents in low-lying areas are advised to take all necessary precautions to secure property and personal effects. An advisory has also been issued for seafarers. The weather report notes that seas are forecast to be locally rough with waves and swells of 6 to 9 feet or 1.8 to 2.1 meters. Therefore, small craft operators and sea bathers are advised to exercise caution due to brisk winds and rough seas. As the system continues to develop, more information will be shared with the general public. Reporting for the Hot 7 TV News, I am Jasmine Duncan.
We'll have the latest from the LEBOURNE Meteorological Office following this morning's news, but first, in the past 2 years, the island has recorded an unprecedented number of homicides, all tasked to be investigated by the police. Commenting on the inundation of these cases, Acting Deputy Police Commissioner Mr. Ronald Phillip highlighted the difficulties associated with homicide investigations. He also divulged new strategies the police are employing to quell confidentiality concerns from individuals who want to assist with these cases but are fearful for their lives.
Between 2021 and 2022 so far, the Royal St. Lucia Police Force would have been tasked to probe 137 homicide investigations, all the whilst public pressure mounts for the state's enforcement arm to contain crime. The Acting Deputy Commissioner underscored the difficulty of dealing with the number of these active homicide cases, as they are far more complex than critics presume. Nonetheless, Superintendent Phillip highlighted that the police will not allow criminals to foster fear in the society.
Obviously, it's something difficult because when you have a homicide, you don't only have a murdered victim, you also have the family of the victims, you have police officers, fire service who have responded. So there are secondary victims, and there's always this psychological impact, even the fear that the community faces. So it is a real issue. So it can be a difficult task. But the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, we are not going to let any bunch of thugs, any criminals put our backs against the wall. And I can tell you, we are going to aggressively pursue every criminal, every individual who we suspect or have information that is involved in any nefarious activity.
The lack of witness statements severely hinders the investigations of police, as they rely heavily on these disclosures to assist with their operations. It is known that individuals are fearful to cooperate with police, as there is a fear of a breach of confidentiality which can put their life at risk. The Acting Deputy Commissioner notes that there are measures in place whereby citizens can anonymously provide tips on cases.
I cannot speak to confidentiality being breached. Sometimes, the perception, that is a perception out there, but we have put measures in place. Like I indicated earlier, we have this new hotline, the 555 number. You can call. Your identity is not important. You can give information. You can call 45 crime. You can call the commissioner direct. I guess if you have information, you can give it to the commissioner or any member of the executive direct. But sometimes persons need to be mindful that yes, they say they give the police the information, but before they give the police the information, they may have spoken to 2 or 3 other persons. So this is another issue. So sometimes information comes out, but you cannot pin it down to one particular individual. So sometimes when we have information, we tell many people, including the police. So it is always good. And you don't even have to, you can choose to give the information to a social worker. Let a social worker transmit it to the police. So that way you do not know where the information is coming from.
Phillip also assured citizens that the RSLPF remains committed to protecting the security interests of the populace. Reporting for the Hot 7 TV News, I am Kareem Nelson.
More on the national security matters in just a bit, but first, President of the National Youth Council, Yanika Jabate-Williams, has made her first address to the nation, promising to serve the island's youth with the highest degree of integrity. She heads a new executive which consists of highly skilled and professional youth advocates who will serve initially for a 2-year term.
The 2022 to 2024 National Youth Council results are in. After a few weeks of heavy campaigning and stiff competition, 7 of the island's youth leaders took their seat as the new National Youth Council executive. Serving in the capacity of president is Yanika Jabate-Williams, first vice president Dylan Emmanuel, second vice president Zena George, General Secretary Nicole Harrell, Assistant Secretary Marcus Girau, Public Relations Officer Genevieve Gonzague, and Treasurer Janique Louis. The announcement was made at the Council's 17th Biennial General Assembly on Saturday, 19th November. Williams says herself and the team are ready and eager to represent the island's youth effecting change.
The challenge ahead is a monumental one. However, my executive and I are ready. Since coming into office on Saturday evening, we began putting action plans in place as to how we will deal with the various issues confronting the youth of St. Lucia. My executive consists of a wide range of professionals and is committed to ensuring that the youth on the island are represented.
In closing, she shares details on an upcoming meeting to officially welcome the new executive and thanks those who voted.
We are looking forward to working with all stakeholders to regain the trust of all in the St. Lucia National Youth Council. In the coming week, a press conference will be held to address all your burning questions. We want to thank the youth of St. Lucia for putting their trust in us and electing us to serve them for the next 2 years.
The Saint Lucia National Youth Council was established in 1985 and was initially government funded to deliver national participation programs. To date, the Saint Lucia National Youth Council functions as a democratic and independent non-governmental organization of over 150 youth and student organizations which represent the interests and ideals of St. Lucia's young people. Reporting for the Hot 7 TV News, I am Jasmine Duncan.
St. Lucia's Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre, who also holds a portfolio for national security, is hoping that the Royal St. Lucia Police Force will be able to contain the anticipated uptick in criminal activity as the festive season approaches. The Prime Minister also revealed that the government has a pledge to provide the police with 2 additional vehicles to assist with patrols. However, Prime Minister Pierre wants the police to be concentrated on law enforcement policies.
The Royal St. Lucia Police Force is already making adjustments to its operations to get up for the Christmas season, which is notorious for petty crime. In a recent interview with Acting Deputy Police Commissioner Ronald Phillip, increased patrols, traffic checks, and active operations were cited as measures being employed to contain criminal activity to a minimal. Superintendent Phillip highlighted that while human resource challenges make the force's task all the more challenging, augmentations have been made to allow for greater police presence in communities. Prime Minister Pierre, who has continuously expressed his concern about the crime scourge on island, hopes that the police possess the ability to uphold national security. He also disclosed that more vehicles are on the way for the RSLPF.
I really hope so. I had a meeting with the Commissioner this morning. We are giving the police 2 more vehicles for patrol purposes. We're going to get 2 more vehicles shortly. They have an operational plan for the season, so we hope all works well.
Earlier this year, Parliament enacted more stringent penalties for the illegal possession of firearms and ammunition. When Pierre was questioned as to whether he believes the stricter penalties have proven effective, he stated that the onus is on the court to impose the punishments. Nonetheless, the Prime Minister urged purveyors of gun violence to desist from their criminal acts.
I want to warn the young people of St. Lucia, having a firearm can land you in jail for 25 years. I want to warn them. Having a firearm can land you in prison for 25 years. Even though you did not use it, once you have it, the law says you can be in prison for 25 years. So I'm begging young people, please avoid having firearms. It's not worth it.
The government of Jamaica announced on Tuesday, November 15, that it has declared states of emergency zones in several parishes across the island to reduce crime rates in particular areas. Over the past 2 years, St. Lucia has struggled to combat more heinous crimes as homicide rates soar. Prime Minister Pierre, who is also National Security Minister, was asked if a similar approach would be employed on island to mitigate crime.
I noticed Jamaica did that. I'm not in a position to comment on it, but what I want to tell you is that there seems to be a pandemic of crime. pandemic of crime. As you said for yourself, Jamaica just passed it. Barbados has issues. There's a pandemic, and I think the next CARICOM heads of government, ministers, prime ministers have to sit down and make the discussion of crime a priority.
Reporting for the Hot 7 TV News, I am Kareem Nelson.
The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has painted a bleak picture for St. Lucia's economic prospects following the conclusion of consultations with the government of St. Lucia. In a statement released Friday, the IMF noted that the COVID-19 pandemic and import prices increased due to the war in Ukraine, which had severely affected St. Lucia. According to an IMF release, after the collapse in 2022, tourist arrivals have rebounded significantly in 2021-2022, but the release after the IMF Executive Board concluded Article 5 consultations with St. Lucia observed that recovery remains incomplete. The public balance sheets remain under considerable strain, with a sizable fiscal deficit and a significant increase in public debt since 2019, it noted. According to the IMF, inflation has picked up, with the surge in commodity prices somewhat mitigated by price controls and energy subsidies. The IMF also disclosed that the financial sector has remained stable, but non-performing loans have risen during the pandemic. It said output is projected to gradually recover to the pre-pandemic level by 2024, slowed by the impacts of the war in Ukraine and the tightening of global financial conditions. In addition, the International Financing Institution explained that weak balance sheets and higher input costs and supply constraints, public and private investment. It said inflation is projected to rise to 6.4% in 2022. The financial outlook is challenging due to the high public debt and large refinancing needs, which lead financing constraints. Without additional policy measures, public debt is projected to stabilize around 90% of GDP in the medium term, limited the space for public infrastructure and social investments, the world body stated. Nevertheless, it said the current account deficit is projected to narrow gradually with tourism recovery. The IMF directors concurred that in the near term, fiscal policy should focus on protecting the most vulnerable from food and fuel increases. Given financing constraints, they encouraged the authorities to prioritize spending and increase global energy price pass-through while supporting vulnerable households with targeted transfers, the IMF release stated. The main opposition, United Workers' Party, has rejected the position of Tourism and Investment Minister regarding confidentiality on the Global Ports Holdings deal. Senator Dominic Fede has described as extremely shocking suggestions that there needs to be a level of confidentiality with the details surrounding the development agreement with Global Ports Holdings. The deal has been a point of contention for the opposition and some tourism stakeholders since government's announcement that it had signed a memorandum of understanding with the developer.
Senator Dominic Fede has rejected his successor's position regarding confidentiality on the GPH deal. Instead, he contends that the ports earmarked for development are state assets that have been under the management of government for over 40 years. He stressed that if plans are in place to engage a private investor on enhancements to the people's real estate, then the company must be prepared to be transparent with the details of the development. Fede insists that it is unacceptable for the commercial interest of the investor to be prioritized over the people's right to full disclosure on the project. The government announced plans for the redevelopment of Port Castries and Soufriere to include what Tourism Minister Dr. Ernest Hilaire disclosed was a boardwalk in Castries, upgrades to Banan Bay, and upgrades to the docks in Soufriere, among other plans.
I don't buy the argument that because they have competitors or because they are trading on the stock market and this can affect certain commercial realities of the company, that the people should be left out of the know. No, you need to let us know. If you have a company that is coming, that proposes to come to operate a significant state asset such as our seaports, then if that company is not willing to expose itself to the public scrutiny, which is justifiably so, then that company should not come.
FIDE has accused the SLP administration of having double standards and failing to comply with the same transparency demands that it placed on the UWP administration while in opposition. Recounting the pressure mounted on the former UWP administration by the then opposition regarding DSH and other projects, FIDE stressed that the government must be held to the same standards it expects from others.
The then opposition St. Lucia Labour Party called on the government, of which I was part of, to make the documents public, to make the agreements public.
Reporting for the Hot 7 TV News, I am Kareem Nelson.
Finally, from us this hour, the government of Taiwan on Monday provided financial support to 3 St. Lucian initiatives, providing relief to citizens. The National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, received a check of $267,000 to assist with the relief efforts from the November 6th trough. The trough triggered devastating floods in the north of the island. Aside from the contribution to NEMO, the reinstatement of the distress fund received $1 million from the Taiwanese. Additionally, the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, SSDF, received $2.6 million, which will go towards stimulus programs throughout the country. That's the news. First news of the day with Shannon LeBourne.
The morning news, first news of the day, is sponsored by Quartz.
Black Friday deals continue at Quartz Optical. Shop now November 20th through to 25th and enjoy BOGO. Buy one, get one free. You heard right. Buy one pair of glasses and get a second pair absolutely free. Payment plans available from 3 to 24 months. Schedule your appointment online today on www.quartzoptical.com. It's easy and convenient. Black Friday sale continues. BOGO free. Only at Quartz Optical. Value you can see.
Good morning. Stand by for the sports. In sports this hour, we kick off with under-19 schools football. In the lone scheduled game at the SAB at VG, which materialized on Friday, November the 18th, the St. Lucia Sports Academy defeated the Castries Comprehensive Secondary 5-0. Traylon Henry scored a hat-trick, with his goals coming in the 34th, the 38th, and 45th minutes of play. Also scoring in that encounter, Imani Butcher, who scored his goal in the 53rd minute of play. The scheduled under-15 match between Castries Comprehensive Secondary and the St. Mary's College did not materialize. The Castries Comprehensive Secondary were awarded the points. Petroleum company Sol presented cash and other support in the sum of $10,000 to the Saint Lucia Football Association, urging support to the national football team. Sol commercial executive Lucina Eugene presented a check to the General Secretary of the Saint Lucia Football Association, Mr. Victor Reed. Sol launched an initiative on Friday ahead of the match against San Marino, in which the company encouraged attendees to fuel up at the company's petrol stations and deposit the receipts in the box at halftime, during which the company would provide them with special prizes. On Sunday, the company rewarded another 15 winners with various prizes.